Prabhupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Shlotar Shachri Srimad Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanande Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3rd Chapter 4 Text 4 प्रपन्नार्ति हरेणः बदरीं त्वं प्रयाहीति स्वकुलं सञ्जिहीर्षुणा अहं चोक्तो भगवता प्रपन्नार्ति हरेणः बदरीं त्वं प्रयाहीति स्वकुलं सञ्जिहीर्षुणा अहं चोक्तो भगवता प्रपन्नार्ति हरेणः बदरीं त्वं प्रयाहीति स्वकुलं सञ्जिहीर्षुणा अहं I cha and uktah was told Bhagavata by the Supreme Lord Prapanna of the surrendered Arti Harena by he who is the vanquisher of the distresses. Ha indeed Badarim to Badri Tvam you Prayahi should go Iti thus Swakulam his own family Sanjihir Shuna who desired to destroy. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada. Translation: the Lord is the vanquisher of the distresses of one who is surrendered unto him. Thus, he who desired to destroy his family told me previously to go to Badrikashram. While at Dwarka, Uddhava was warned to avoid the distresses which were to follow the disappearance of the Lord and the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. He was advised to proceed to Badrikashram because there he could associate with the devotees of Narnarayan, and in their association of devotional service, he could increase his eagerness for chanting, hearing, knowledge, and detachment. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So I continue today the discussion on the Srimad Bhagavatam, where
recording in progress.
So we're discussing the topic of making sense of seemingly senseless suffering. So the incident is Krishna's departure from the world and the internecine fratricidal fights between his associates, which led to their departure. So, yesterday I discussed two main points. First is that the Bhagavatam is spoken to aid Parikshit Maharaj in reinforcing his conviction to just put everything else aside and focus on remembering Krishna. And one important thing that he may have to put aside is the feeling of resentment, the feeling of injustice and unfairness, that for such a small offense, such a severe punishment came upon him. And thus, every major story in the Bhagavatam depicts how great souls throughout history, have had suffered far more than what Parikshit Maharaj suffered, and far trivial offenses, sometimes no offense at all, than what Parikshit Maharaj suffered. Therefore, Mahajano Yenagataha Sapanta. He should follow in the footsteps of those great souls and take shelter of the Lord. And then taking shelter of the Lord can happen in two ways. There is, for the things in our control, diligence for Krishna. And for things not in our control, dependence on Krishna. And when Parikshit Maharaj has accepted that, he's accepted the curse, now he's going to depart from the world. Then at that time, it is entirely dependence on Krishna, with which he is to surrender. So now this particular verse is quite intriguing. Of course, intriguing is a gentle word to use for it. But the reality is, you see, there are two seemingly contradictory describers of the Lord over here. First is that Prapannarti Harena, that one who Hara is to take away. Hari is the Lord who takes away. Prapanna Arti. Arti is the act of worship. But Arti, Arto Jigyasur. Artha is distress. So the idea is that Arti can take away our Artha. That when we worship the Lord, our distress goes away. So Prapan Arti, that those who surrender, their distress is taken away by the Lord. Now this is, relatively speaking, a common way of glorifying the Lord. But this is accompanied in the same verse by something seemingly opposite. Swakulam Sanjihirshuna. Sanjihirshuna. Swakulam, his own people. Sanjihirshuna. He desired to destroy. Now, if the Lord is the remover of the distresses of those who surrender to him, why would he want to destroy his own dynasty? Sanjihir Shuna. It's very clear. That's what he desired. That was his plan. So now to reconcile these two, we say it's like saying this person is so kind that he desired to kill his family. Hey, what? What kind of sadistic logic is that? But the point over here is to understand Krishna's love. We need to broaden and deepen our vision. Broaden means that life does not begin with birth and it does not end with death. Now, if we look from within a limited framework, anybody, even the most loving person, can seem unloving. Now, a parent who is disciplining their child, maybe they are yelling at their child, maybe they are taking away the facilities of the child, grounding the child. That parent may not seem loving at all. But to see how the parent loves the child, you have to expand the framework. You have to broaden our vision. Okay, that particular interaction may not seem loving, but overall, that interaction is motivated by love. And that love will be seen as love if we look in the broader perspective. So sometimes if we see things within a limited framework, we cannot see things as they actually are. In fact, a limited framework can give us the vision that is opposite to the vision that is of reality. So, from our finite perspectives, from the perspective of one lifetime, if we try to see Krishna's love, we may not be able to see it at all. Not at all. See, the nature of the world is that we perceive the world through our senses. That is pratyaksha pramana. And with pratyaksha, with our senses, sometimes what we see will reinforce our faith in Krishna. And sometimes what we see will challenge or even wound our faith in Krishna. And so, therefore, what we need to do is that we need to process our sensory experience or our sensory perception rather in the light of our intelligence. I'll explain what I mean by this. That sometimes we may talk about, if you're talking to very new people, we talk about the existence of God. We say, look at how well the universe is designed. If you consider, we get rains by clouds, and the clouds are like a mobile water tank. A mobile water tank that is aircraft proof. The designers of twin towers could not make a aircraft proof technology. Entire airplane goes to a cloud, and there's practically no leakage. So we may talk about the evidence of design in the universe, and that can point us to the existence of God. But an atheist can ask that, if the clouds and the whole mechanism of rain was designed by God to provide us water, then why does it rain over the oceans? There is no need for water over the oceans. Well, why does it rain over the oceans? So that atheists can ask this question and choose to be atheistic. If we go to a mansion which has 50 rooms and one room is unclean and remaining 49 rooms are very orderly, now we can look at the evidence of the 49 rooms that are orderly and say, hey, this house has a good housekeeper. Or we can look at the one room that is disorderly and we can say, this room has no housekeeper at all. So what we choose to focus on is up to us. And what we focus on will determine the inference that we arrive at. So, because the Lord has given us free will has no meaning unless there is facility to exercise that free will. If in a meeting somebody says, you are completely free to express your opinion as long as you agree with me, that is no freedom at all. So, free will means there has to be the capacity to exercise the free will. So that means that if we are free to turn toward Krishna or free to turn away from Krishna, and we all have intelligence, and Krishna has arranged the world in such a way that if we want to turn towards Him with our intelligence, we can find the evidence to turn towards Him, to believe in His existence, to believe in His benevolence, and turn towards Him. But if we want to turn away from Him, we can find evidence even for that. And Krishna has created such evidence. Now we can look at the overall balance of the world and we can see the preponderance of order and design in the world. See, many times when people ask, why do bad things happen to good people? That question itself arises from a presumption. Sometimes people, this is one of the most common questions, that if God is good, why do bad things happen to good people? This is the problem of evil. Well, we can turn this question around and ask, why should bad things not happen to good people? What do you mean? Good things should happen to good people, bad things to bad people. Well, who said so? If there is no God, if there is no organizing principle, then this question itself becomes meaningless. The very assumption that good things should happen to good people and bad things should happen to bad people, that assumption, the very question, why do bad things happen to good people, presumes the existence of an order. And we do see in our life that we can find causal explanations for many things. So if, say, suddenly we get cold, maybe we find, okay, yesterday I slept in the AC, or I didn't close my window and the cold wind came up. If our stomach is upset, we can find out, okay, what did I eat yesterday? What have we been eating in the last few days? So now we all work on this assumption that whenever something happens, effects have causes. And many times we are able to find those causes. Even atheists don't raise their children saying that actually the whole universe is chaotic. There is no cause effect, there's no ordering principle. Now, whether when you wake up you make your bed or you don't make your bed, it's all the same. Whether you study in school or you don't study in school, it's all the same. Nobody lives like that. So we all assume the existence of an organizing principle. By organizing principle is, I mean that principle which connects causes with effects, with actions with results. But undoubtedly, there are times when we cannot see the cause effect correlation. So normally, if somebody eats good food and exercises, they will be healthy. And normally, somebody doesn't eats all kind of junk food and doesn't exercise, then they will become unfit, they will become sick. That's normally way things work. Now, there could be exceptions, no doubt, but the exceptions require some other explanation. The exceptions don't disprove the existing explanation. Normally, health and diet and exercise lead to good health. But despite diet and exercise, somebody is not having good health. Yeah, maybe that person was born with a congenital condition because of which they were vulnerable to disease. We can find other explanations. So the point is that if when we see something which we can't understand, if the conclusion we come to is that everything is chaotic and disorderly, and there is no explanatory basis for anything, well, nobody functions like that. Nobody, absolutely nobody functions like that, even in our day-to-day life. And same way with Krishna. So in the Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto, when this particular pastime is described, the whole pastime at one level can seem, as I yesterday said, it can be challenging to our faith, but it can also be puzzling in a way that is meant to awaken the intelligence. It is said that Krishna sat down in meditation and then a hunter shot an arrow, and that arrow hit his leg. Arrow attacked his leg or wounded his leg, and Krishna died because of that. That's what is described. Now, first of all, an arrow hitting the arrow wounding the leg, it's not a fatal wound. And Krishna is a seasoned warrior. Krishna is not like a fragile prince who lived pampered, never exposed to the hardships of life that a small wound would kill him. So the Bhagavatam itself raises pertinent questions. Which evidence will we focus on? It says that Krishna was so invincible that he went to the abode of Yamaraj. He went to the abode of the Lord of Death. And after going there, nobody comes back from that abode. But he not only came back, he brought someone back from there. Who was that? The sons of his guru, Sandipani Muni. So if that person who could defy death to such an extent, that person came back living and brought back to the life somebody who was supposed to be dead, how could that person's death be ordinary? How could that person die by an arrow wound to the leg? So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami quotes Jiva Goswami, and he says that this kind of pastime, the Lord's departure pastime, is Asura Mohana Leela. It is a Leela, it is a pastime. But the primary purpose of this pastime is Asura Mohan. Mohan is to delude, Asur is demons. To delude the demoniac. To delude the demoniac. What does that mean? That means if those who are godless, if those who are atheistic, those who are demoniac want to stay that way, then within the Lord's manifest pastimes, there are a few pastimes which they can quote to justify their atheism, their nihilism, their materialism, their godlessness. And this is one such pastime. And because it is a Asura Mohan Leela, that's why generally devotees don't like to discuss it. The devotees love to discuss those pastimes which nurture their heart with love for Krishna, which nourish their attraction to the Lord. And that's why while this pastime is described, the 10th canto is extensively discussed and commented on. But this section is not commented on by the Acharya so much. You will never have a Bhagavad Saptaha or a Bhagavad Katha focused on Krishna's disappearance pastime. Why? Yes, it is an incident that occurred in Krishna's life, but it has a particular purpose. The purpose of devotees in discussing Krishna Katha is to Nivritta tarshairupagiyamanat bhavavishada shrotra manobhiramat kauttama shloka gunanuvadat puman virajyet vinapashubhnat. It says that we all want to relish Krishna Katha because it is the aushadhi, it is the medicine which frees our hearts of impurities. And it is not just a medicine that removes impurities, but it's also a medicine that energizes our heart with love for Krishna. So it de-energizes our worldly desires and it energizes our spiritual divine desires. And those are the kind of pastimes we wish to hear more and more. So I'll talk about three main points today. So how to make sense of this? So when something just doesn't seem to make sense, when something seems to challenge our very faith at its foundation, then at that time we need to see that this kind of incidents are orchestrated by the Lord so that those who want to reject him can get justification for rejecting him. And so I said that we have to process our pratyaksha. Pratyaksha is our perception with our senses. We process our pratyaksha in a way that nourishes our faith, not in a way that damages our faith. And that is the intelligence which we have to use constantly. Now, does that mean that we the every single thing that we can't understand, we put it in the, sometimes we use the word inconceivable, achintya. Now, anything that we can't understand, can we call it achintya? Well, it's not that simple. If anybody is doing something objectionable, if somebody is, we come to the temple and we see some person, some devotee, maybe stealing money from the temple hundi, a temple donation box, we say this is inconceivable. No, that is not inconceivable. Calling it inconceivable will be irresponsible. The idea is that we have to use our intelligence as far as it goes. Our intelligence is a gift given by us to Krishna, given by Krishna to us. So we have to use it as far as I can. And if we see something as wrong, we have to point it that is wrong. But sometimes our intelligence just doesn't work. Our intelligence cannot make sense of things. So at that time, we need to process our experience appropriately. So now that brings us to second point. We can't always make sense of suffering, but we can make sense in suffering. Now, what is the difference between the two of these? Make sense of suffering and make sense in suffering. That means, say, suppose sudden fire has broken out. Now, if fire breaks out, at that time, firefighters will be called. And I have a friend in California who's a firefighter. So he told me that generally, when we are rushing to the fire, whoever has called us, we try to get some information from them. What caused the fire? So if we are looking at the fire, we try to figure out what this caused by, was it arson? Was it a fuel explosion? What was it? So that helps us better deal with the fire. But sometimes we just can't figure out. There is no easy way to know what caused the fire. So make sense of suffering means understand what caused the fire. But make sense in suffering means, okay, we don't know what caused the fire, but we want to make sure that the fire doesn't spread. So, okay, the fire can spread in this direction and this direction. Okay, this direction, there are a lot of houses, a lot of people living over there. We don't want this fire to spread over there. So we will attack the fire from here. We'll counter the fire over here. So make sense in suffering means that we don't know what caused something, but we can act in a way that at least doesn't make things worse, that makes things better. So we need to choose that course of action. And that means here, that's what here the Lord is saying. Now, why would the Lord say Sukulam Sanjihir Shuna? That why did he want to destroy his own dynasty? I said the whole pastime was orchestrated by the Lord because he wanted to delude the demoniac. There could be multiple explanations given for this, but for our context, the Lord is the protector of the surrendered. So this pastime is not for the surrendered; it is for the unsurrendered. For the unsurrendered, if you don't want to accept me, here is the reason for not accepting. But even amid such a situation, now we cannot live with closed eyes. we will see if some distressing or devastating is happening. We will see it. So at that time, what do we do? The Lord is saying, Aham chokto bhagavata. He says, Badrim tvam prayahiti. He says, the Lord told me to go to Badrikashram. This is a scene beyond our control now. This is something which a devastation is going to happen. You make sure that you don't get devastated by it. If you can put out the fire, you put out the fire. If you can't put out the fire, then you move to a place where you stay safe. And the Lord didn't just tell him to stay safe. The Lord actually gave him the Uddhav Gita, the message of the Uddhav message, his instructions he gave to Uddhava. And with that, he was going to go to the sages and he was going to discuss with them. And Srila Prabhupada uh, met Bhaktivedanta Thakur in 1922. That time the Gaudiya Math had just started growing, and Bhaktivedanta Thakur was slowly becoming prominent. And he was, as Prabhupada would call him, Simha Guru. Simha Guru, not just because he was strong in chastising others, but he had such charisma and power. So by the time 1937, when he departed, there were 64 Gaudiya Maths all over India. It was a powerful organization. But after his departure, a fire started. And there are times when Prabhupada was invited for the Vyas Puja of offerings, and sometimes when Prabhupada spoke, there's one lecture of Srila Prabhupada, the Guru is one, it comes to science of self-realization. But Prabhupada is very strongly saying, he says that basically what are we doing? Instead of carrying on our Guru's mission, we are just satisfied eating and sleeping and fighting with each other over property. We need to carry out our Guru's mission. It's very strong words. Relatively speaking, Prabhupada was a junior god brother over there. We think of Prabhupada as the founder Acharya, but we don't think of, it's difficult for us to think of Prabhupada as a junior devotee. But within the Gaudiya Math's hierarchy, Prabhupada was almost like an outsider. All these were sannyasis, they were initiating gurus, and Prabhupada was a grahastha who didn't even who had not himself started in a single center. Prabhupada spoke strongly, but nothing happened. Nobody took him very seriously. Oh, the nice words, nice sentiment. And they continued fighting. So what did Prabhupada do? Prabhupada saw that. Prayahiti. Prabhupada just left it. Prabhupada left for America. And he continued his preaching. So there are some things in this world that if we can't fix them, then we have to protect our consciousness and focus on an area where we can do something constructive. So that's the second point. Even if we can't make sense of suffering, we can make sense in suffering. Okay, this particular building is burnt. I can't stop it. But at least let me make sure that another building doesn't get burnt. Later on, we can find out what caused the burning of this building. Sometimes we may find out, sometimes as firefighters, they have to say the cause unknown. We don't know what caused it. Was it arson? Was it accident? We don't know. So life, see, humility has many different understandings. But one understanding of humility means to accept that there are some things which we may never understand. That intellectual humility can mean the physical domain where we come in front of the Lord and his devotees and bow down. That's physical humility. But intellectual humility means to acknowledge that there are some things which we may never understand. And this is not just a rationalization of the inexplicable. That, because you can't explain, so you're saying be humble. No, this is there in every field. Even in the field of science. If you look at quantum physics, it's such a complicated field that there was one quantum physicist who said that if you think you have understood quantum physics, that itself is proof that you haven't understood quantum physics. There are many quotes like that. He says the universe is not just queerer than we imagine, it is queerer than what we can imagine. There's one scientist who was asked by students, how do you figure this out? How do you make sense of it? How do you visualize this? He says, stop thinking, start calculating. The equations work, just use them. So the idea that there are things which we can't make sense of and we need to accept that is there even in science. So it's everywhere. So humility means to accept that there are some things which we may never understand. So we may not be able to make sense of suffering, but we can make sense in suffering. Okay, I can act in a sensible way right now. I can act in a way that makes things better. And then that brings me to the last part. say that, we need experience of Krishna more than explanation from Krishna. The explanation is for our head, for our intelligence. And explanation is important. All this, not saying in any way it's not important. Analysis, intelligence, and understanding are important. And we need explanation. But more than explanation is experience of Krishna. Experience of Krishna is the highest experience that the soul can ever have. And that experience is what enriches us, it enlivens us, it purifies us, it ultimately liberates us. So, bhakti pareshanubhava viraktiranyatra cha. Bhakti is the process that can give us para isha anubhav, the experience of the Supreme Lord. This word para isha anubhav, anubhav is experience, isha is the Lord, but it is prefaced with the prefix para. Para means transcendental. That means that Lord cannot be experienced simply by our senses. It is not that just we come in front of the Lord and look at the deities and we will experience Krishna. Maybe we will, maybe we will not. No, it is if we have bhakti in our heart, we will experience Krishna over here. Without bhakti, we will just see them as as some people say, decorated dolls. So it is bhakti which gives us experience of Krishna, and that experience is what is most important. Now, do we seek explanation? Yes, we do. We use our intelligence to try to make sense as much as possible. But we understand that intelligence is finite. And that's why in the Uddhav Gita it is said that the Jnanis, they use their intelligence to discriminate between matter and spirit and to attain spirit. But if they are to attain the supreme spirit, they have to do the supreme renunciation. And the supreme renunciation is the renunciation of their jnana. That with their intelligence they can discriminate. Oh, this is temporary, this is eternal. This is Maya, this is Brahman. For them it's Brahman. They can discriminate like that. And they can and should. But even that will take them only to the Brahman level. If they want to go to Bhagavan, if they want to stay at the spiritual level and release the spiritual level, they need to put aside their intelligence. But that doesn't mean reject the intelligence. It means subordinate the intelligence when it doesn't work. We don't. Our intelligence should be our minister, not our master. That means we consult it. Like a king has ministers, the ministers give advice. But the king is not king. The minister is not supposed to be the king of the king. Sometimes the king may have to act irrespective of what the minister says. So, like that, intelligence is a very valuable resource for us. But it's meant to be a minister, not a master. Just because something doesn't make sense doesn't mean we stop practicing bhakti. The experience of Krishna is the ultimate CT, confirmatory test for a devotee. That in the Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita, now we talk about various pramanas. We talk about pratyaksha, anuman, shabda. We have sensory perception is there, inference is there, and scriptural testimony is there. And normally we say shabda, that is the highest pramana. That we rely on scripture and not so much on our senses or on our mind's inferences, which is true. But in Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatam, he says anubhav is the highest pramana. Experience is the highest source of authority. I may say, what does this mean? This might seem like very postmodern spirituality. I feel good, this is good for me. You feel good that way, that is good for you. Well, it's not that simple. What he's saying is, I'll use a medical metaphor to explain this, I'll conclude with this, that if somebody is sick, then I may think, oh, I'm sick, I'll take this particular food item, or I'll take this meal, or I'll stop doing that, I'll take this pill. Okay, I may have some authority. But if there is an authorized doctor and there's authorized medical textbook, that has far more authority. So in terms of gaining or choosing a particular process for curing my sickness, I can't just rely on my sense perception. I can't just rely on my speculation. I need to rely on authority. I need to go to a doctor and get the proper treatment. So in that sense, pratyaksha, anuman and shabda is highest. So here shabda I am roughly comparing with authorized medical textbook. So that is true. But in terms of whether I am being cured by the medicine or not, now for that, my own experience is the highest testimony, isn't it? Now, if I have been taking a medicine for 3 months and the doctor has said in 1 month you will feel better, and 3 months I'm not feeling better, tell the doctor I'm not feeling better. The doctor says, your experience is wrong. This medicine has cured 3 million people. Well, okay, but I am not cured. So, on the other hand, if I am cured, nowadays many people, they are tired with mainstream allopathy and they take alternative medicines. And mainstream allopathy tries to label all such alternative medicines as quacks. Somebody may say that what you are taking a quack. What you are taking, you are going to a quack. You are taking medicine that is fake. But if I am cured, I don't care whether you call it a quack or not, isn't it? Because my experience of my health is the highest confirmatory test for me. So, in terms of choosing a path, we need to rely on Shabda. But in terms of verifying whether that path is working or not, our experience is the highest confirmatory test. And what that means is, no matter what situation we are in our life, sometimes we may not be able to get an explanation for what is happening. But the experience of Krishna is still there. No matter what else is going on in our life, we can chant Krishna's name, we can sing and dance, we can experience something higher. When we immerse ourselves in Krishna Katha, we can experience something higher, something stabler, something more enduring. When we come in front of the Lord and offer our prayers, we all have access to the experience of Krishna through the practice of bhakti. And it is that which we need to focus on. So that is what Parikshit Maharaj does, and that is what Uddhava is being told to do over here. Parikshit Maharaj, okay, why did this happen to me? Why did I get so angry that I put a snake bird on that particular sage? Or why did that sage have to be in samadhi at that time that he could respond to me and provide me some water? Why did that sage have to have a short-tempered son who was so powerful enough to curse me? We could have gone to so many why questions. But he shifted. Not why do bad things happen to good people? Yesterday I said, when bad things happen to good people, what do good people do? So for him, in the remembrance of Krishna, through hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, the experience of Krishna was available. And that experience was what enabled him to transcend his suffering. And eventually the snake bird came and bit him. But even before that snake bird came and bit him, Parikshit Maharaj had become so absorbed in Krishna that he transcended the suffering. That he had already attained Krishna before his body was bit by the snake bird. Similarly, Uddhava, in discussing about Krishna, completely became absorbed, and he was able to transcend the agony caused by the devastation that he had seen with his own eyes. The same thing comes in the Bhagavatam, in the first canto itself. The last glimpse of Krishna, I said that the trailer, and the trailer in the first canto concludes with 1.15, and that is what? Arjuna is remembering Krishna. And in remembrance of Krishna, in remembrance of the Gita, Arjuna becomes peaceful. Arjuna's distress goes away. Bhishma is on a deathbed, on an arrow bed. Now, an arrow bed is actually the antithesis of what we would call a bed. Isn't it? On our bed, if there is even a small lump, a little bit, with the blanket or the bed is a little lump, we feel uncomfortable. Now, if there is a nail in the bed protruding out, it would be unbearable. If the whole bed is made of nails, what would be our condition? So he is an antithesis of what we call a bed. But he's experiencing Krishna. And by that experience of Krishna, he transcends the physical pain. So for all of us, also the explanation may or may not be available, but the experience is always available. By prioritizing the experience, we can stay connected with Krishna and we can stay progressive on the path to attain Krishna. So I'll summarize. I spoke today on making sense of senseless suffering, seemingly senseless suffering, in three broad parts. The first is, I discussed about when our sensory perception challenges our faith, We need to focus on the evidence that reinforces our faith. Don't ask, why does rain fall on the ocean? Rains fall on the earth. Don't look at the one room that is disorderly. Look at the many rooms that are orderly. Don't look at the time when Krishna seems to not be in control. Krishna seems to have let us down. Look at all the times when Krishna has intervened, Krishna has guided, Krishna has helped. Don't look at how Krishna departed by a mere arrow to the leg. Look at how Krishna went into the abode of death and came back. So we select what we focus on. And the second point was that uh, even if we can't make sense of suffering, we can make sense in suffering. Even if firefighter can't find the cause of fire, they can still make sure the fire doesn't spread further. So rather than, okay, why is this happening? What would Krishna want me to do right now? When there was a fire in the Gaudiya Mutt, Prabhupada tried to get his god brothers to work together to extinguish it. That didn't work. Then he turned and he started his own, focused on his own service to his spiritual master. And the last is that we focus more on the experience of Krishna than an explanation from Krishna. So, humility in the intellectual domain means to acknowledge that some things may never be understandable to us. Or this pastime is a Asur Mohan Leela, meant to delude the demoniac. And as devotees will be impacted by it, but this is not what we dwell on, this is not what we discuss. We focus on those things which will give us a positive experience of Krishna. And experience is the highest praman. Just as for a patient, the fact that they are feeling healthier, they have become healthier, that is the highest confirmatory test that the treatment is working. So even if an explanation may not be available, we can seek it as much as possible. But if it's not available, still we can seek and savor the experience of Krishna and thus stay on the path to be united with him. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments? Be single minded.
Hare Krishna. Thanks for your class, Guru. Just regarding Uddhava, at one point Krishna told Uddhava to take a message to the gopis, and he wanted Uddhava to experience that topmost level of love of God that the gopis were exhibiting. So similarly, Krishna told Uddhava to go to Badrigashram, and there he saw the Supreme Lord in the Narayan form, four-armed form. So I'm just wondering, even though Uddhava, his relationship, very intimate associate with Krishna, was there some significance in being sent to see Narayan? Was there something that Narayan could give that perhaps Krishna wanted to be revealed to Uddhava?
Okay. So was there something that Narayan could give that Krishna wanted Uddhava to receive? That's why I told him, send him to Badrikashram. Well, there are two things over here. First is, generally in the Vedic tradition, going north is the sign of renunciation. That you go north, as from India, north is the Himalayas. So when he's being told to go to Badrikashram, basically the idea is you renounce the world. So bhakti can be practiced while being engaged in the world, and also while being renounced from the world. But at this particular stage, he wanted him to renounce the world. Just focus on your own devotion. Now, there are great sages, there'll be Narayana Rishi. And in their association, Bodhayantaha Parasparam, he can discuss and delight Shanticha Ramanticha. Now, I haven't seen any specific reference that Badrikashram he was told to go because Lord Narayan is there and he's going to either learn something from him or share some confidential message with him. There could be, but I haven't seen any reference specifically for that. It is more that Badrikashram is the place of where one can focus on renounced devotion. That's why he's told to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the classroom. Later on in the third canto, at the end of the third canto, Lord Kapila is speaking about the living entity in the womb and all about the suffering. So I've just got a few questions about that, some that's relevant to the class too. The living entity in the womb takes complete shelter because of their terrible suffering. I'd like to know if that is every living entity, because when people take birth, they don't seem to have any interest generally in Kali Yuga. Is this like specifically elevated living entities that take shelter in the womb? And secondly, when the living entity takes birth in Lord Kapila's discussion, the living entity within the womb is totally surrendered at the Lord's lotus feet. And I know Lord Ram states that if one surrenders just once to me, then I will always protect him and take care. But in this case, the living entity comes out and is completely covered, and it just gets worse and worse. The distresses just pile up. So the question is that just for living entities who are elevated that pray to Krishna? And the second question is once having had that feeling of surrender, why does Krishna allow the material energy to totally cover that soul?
So, do all living entities surrender to the Lord when they are in the mother's womb? Well, there is no, from what I have also had this question, I have discussed with senior devotees and I've read section of Bhagavatam carefully. There is no indication either way, specifically. It is whether this is for all living entities or this for special living entities. The idea is that the Bhagavatam is giving us a generic description of material existence. Now, there's a trajectory that is followed. Now, does every single person follow the trajectory? Maybe, maybe not. It is normally we say that souls they go from here to the heavens and then they come back from the heavens. But there are some souls who go to heavens, they may go to the Brahmaloka, from there, so they may get liberated. Some people may not come to heaven, not here. They may actually fall directly to hell if they do terrible activities. So there is a general trajectory, but there are exceptions. So my understanding is what Bhagavatam describes as a general process. General doesn't mean absolutely universal, but general doesn't necessarily mean rarely exceptional also. There is a general pattern. And the second question, if the living entity surrenders, then is that surrender not accepted? Because when the child is born, many people are not at all having any devotional inclinations. Well, there is circumstantial surrender and there is intentional surrender. Mhm. Now, circumstantial surrender is also good. Yena kena prakarena mana Krishna nivesha. Somehow or the other we fix a mind on Krishna, that is good. But no, love has to be, it can't be forced to be real. Or it not be forced means, say, if a boy proposes to a girl, please marry me. Says, why do you want me to marry you? Why do you want to marry me? Says, I propose to every other girl in town, nobody's ready. Now, that is not the most flattering proposal. So now, if at that time also the girl accepts that boy, then that means the girl really loves that boy. Although she is his last choice, but still she's accepting him. So, like that, for most of us, God is the last choice. We try everything, and when all other solutions fail, then we turn towards God. And now, still Krishna accepts us. That shows his love for us. But Krishna doesn't bind us to those words. Krishna wants our freely offered love, not forcibly given love. So that's why when the child comes out of the womb, the child is again presented the world. Now, every soul at some time or the other in the human existence does get an opportunity to contemplate something higher. So situations are created in such a way. What is the point of all this thing? What is the point of life? And that is the time when the curtains of illusion, the veil of illusion starts parting. If the soul sees to peer through that veil, they can see much more and they can come closer to Krishna. But it depends on the soul. So now, coming regarding the specific point that Lord Ram says, if somebody surrenders to me even once, I accept them forever. That is true, but there is no indication of the time duration. No statement in scripture can be made absolute. Because it's like reality is complex. So it says once somebody surrenders to me, I always protect them. But does protection mean taking away the free will of the soul? No. If that soul by their free will, the soul surrenders now, but after, by the free will, the soul decides to turn away from the Lord. The Lord is not going to forcibly keep them there. That protection means the Lord will give more and more opportunities to turn towards Him. The Lord will create more and more circumstances by which the soul will realize the futility of pursuing things other than Him. And that way the soul will get more and more impetus to turn towards Him. In the similar things in the Bhagavatam, it is said that if we give up the Lord's lotus feet, a devotee who falls away is not the same as a materialist who is just fallen. Because the devotee, Vishwanath Thakur says this, haunted by the taste of Krishna. We can enjoy various pleasures still, or we can seek to enjoy them, but they will just not give that enjoyment. At one level, we can say there is no enjoyment in the material world. Well, maybe that is true, but on another level, we understand that there is some pleasure here. But for one who has experienced the higher taste, that same pleasure doesn't work at all. Okay. That pleasure doesn't work at all. So that's how the Lord doesn't abandon the soul, but the Lord doesn't hold the soul to a promise that is made by the force of circumstances. The Lord waits for that child to act voluntarily, to follow up voluntarily on the surrender that was done circumstantially. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna. Last question. We'll stop on this.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So I'm just conscious people might like prashadam, so feel free to leave question. In this verse, Lord Krishna is described as Artiharana, he who is the vanquisher of distresses. But we also see that Krishna sometimes is the causer of distresses, especially for the devotee. You know, the Anugrahanami verse where he takes away the attachments of the devotee who he wants to come closer to him. So, you know, in one sense, he causes distresses and also takes them away. And so one can also conclude that he causes the distress to heighten or to show the glories of the devotee. Is it mandatory for a devotee to go through suffering or distress in order to obtain the Supreme? Or is there a way in which we can avoid all of that suffering that comes along with it and obtain the Supreme?
So it's a Krishna takes away distress, but Krishna also causes distress. So is it mandatory for every devotee to go through distress? Well, let's consider that. What do we mean by distress? Generally, for all of us, there are certain material things which may be our desires or which may be our needs, whatever it is. You know, there may be we have our health, we have our relationships, we have our social position, we have our wealth. And generally, when we lose these things, that's what we consider as distress. So now, vidyam cha yastad vedo bhayam sa. While we are functioning in the world, we need material things, but we also need spiritual growth. So if a patient is sick and they're in pain, a balanced treatment is that the patient is given pain medication and the patient is given curative medication also. So material things in the world are like pain medication. They're necessary. If we don't eat food, we feel pain. But eating food doesn't solve all our problems. It's like pain medication. We need it, but it is not the solution. So Krishna doesn't want to take away the pain medication. That's not his purpose. But sometimes, it happens in medical cases also, that sometimes the patients take only the pain medication and they start neglecting the curative medication. Maybe it's more expensive, maybe it's too bitter, maybe it's too laborious to take that. So sometimes we also may fixate so much on our pain medication. That means on our material needs, material desires, material comforts. that we may start neglecting our spiritual growth. So at that time, one of the ways in which treatment can be given, a person can be forced to take the curative medicine is stop their pain meds. The doctor sees that this person is becoming, many times the addiction happens, fentanyl and other addictions. They're actually people start it as pain medication, but then they become so hooked to it that they cannot give it up, and that's how they become addicted to drugs. So sometimes the doctor just says, no more pain meds for you. And the patients scream in agony, no, I need this, I can't live without this. But only then they might start taking the curative medicine much more seriously. So like that, when we say sometimes Krishna causes distress, what he means is he takes away our pain meds. And something which we consider important. It's like all of us as devotees have something in Krishna consciousness that we enjoy that is other than Krishna. We are in Krishna consciousness, but we are enjoying something other than Krishna. It could be fame, it could be social respect, it could be power, whatever it is. Now we can use all this in Krishna's service, but that is like our pain med. It's not a bad thing. We may need it. But if we start craving that alone and start neglecting Krishna, then when we say Krishna is the remover of distress, that means ultimately he wants to take us to the spiritual world. There's no distress at all. And even in the material world, he gives us a holistic treatment where the pain med is also there, the curative medicine is also there. So the sustainable way to practice bhakti is that we have our material needs taken care of in a reasonable way, and we are able to address our spiritual priorities also. But sometimes Krishna may take away our material needs, material desires or material attachments, material things that we consider important. So that is what is a distress. So can we avoid it? Well, we can't predict what the future will bring. But in general, we know that Krishna doesn't want to cause us pain. Krishna wants to cure us, free us from all pain. So if we are serious in our spiritual practices, like if a patient is taking the curative medicine properly, then the pain med is not, the doctor has no reason to take away the pain med. Even if it is there, it is okay. And even if it is not there, then it won't be such an upheaval because the patient has not become dependent on them. So in general, being committed in our spiritual practices, and that means also being responsible in our material life. That doesn't mean negligent of our material life. Because see, materially things happen according to the laws of material nature. And we can't expect Krishna to intervene every time. So if I have diabetes and I take sweet prasad, I say this is prasad, it is Krishna. Well, yeah, it is Krishna, but it contains sugar. So material nature works according to certain laws. And Krishna can supplant the working of material nature, but a devotee doesn't demand that. So if I am sick, if I have back pain, then I shouldn't be trying to lift heavy weights, thinking that Krishna will protect me. No. We have to use our intelligence. We understand material nature works according to material principles. And we have to be duly responsible. And a materialist may do it because they want to be material prosperous. A devotee sees that as using the Krishna given intelligence to take care of the Krishna given asset, that is our body, so that we can serve Krishna sustainably. I may lift one weight, one big box now, and afterwards 5 people have to come to lift me up. That is not service to Krishna. So using our intelligence is important. But that is also within the ambit of devotional service for a devotee. We do it with a devotional disposition. Okay? So thank you very much. We'll talk one to one. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur Premanande.
Grace Chaitanya Charan.